Hey guys, Joe here. Today we're doing a video for a folder sent to us by Kizer. They were really awesome and didn't just send us one to review. They let us pick whatever we wanted, and we picked kind of an interesting one. You're either going to be really for it or really against it, but it's got some really cool stuff to it, which is why we got kind of less than ideal lighting here because it helps show off that little feature. Today we're doing a first impressions of the Kizer Tomb, a coffin-shaped knife, and if you catch it there in the light, which you can't get with my shop lights, you see that the skeletonized liners are literally a freaking skeleton. That is the coolest thing in the world to me. I'm a very big fan of Halloween, ooky spooky horror stuff. I'm a very morbid guy. I think that's really awesome. So this is something you're either going to really like or really not like. Let's get into it. The Kizer Tomb. Now, as always, whenever I'm sent something by a company, especially when I get to pick that something, I might be a little biased, but I'm going to do my best to be as impartial as possible. I've carried this for 2 to 3 weeks. This is just the first impressions. We'll come back for a review later down the road if people are interested. Overall, I think this is really cool. This is coming in at a price point of just under $70. It's like 69 some change. I'm sure there'll be sales later in the year on Kizer's website, as well as maybe Amazon and a couple other retailers. I think the price is fair for what we're getting. Usually when we have a coffin style knife, it's cheap gas station garbage. This definitely does put form over function a little bit, and we'll talk about that more later, but it's still a good quality knife. Kizer is known as one of the best production knife companies in the world. They're very involved with the knife community and their fan base. They're a really, really great company and a wonderful one to support. So they're still giving us a very good quality knife. And for that reason, because it's unique, because it's high quality, unlike other knives of this style, they can kind of demand a little bit extra for that. And I think that's fair. Now, getting into the actual size of the knife, if we bring the handle up to a line there, the handle is really nice, very generous in terms of spacing. Let me move it forward a little bit more. 1, 2, 3, 4, 4.5-ish inches. I get a really, really nice grip on this. Even if I'm up high, you can see I can put like another finger or two on there. So even if you've got big hands, you can choke up on this and get a full hand on there. If you're a grizzly bear, if you got little hands, you can come back like this very, very comfortably. Like say if you got really little hands, you can still use this knife very well because of how it holds. It doesn't matter whether you want to choke up and go back, big, small hands. This is a very, very usable handle. And again, did I mention that it has literally skeletonized liners? So dope. Now moving into the actual blade length itself, bring it down to the top of the coffin there. We've got 1, 2, 3.25 inches, I'd say, in terms of overall blade length. And then the cutting edge there is just over 2.5. And so this is a very good usable knife. It's got a very big, comfortable handle, but the blade is still normal EDC type length. I think that's great. It's going to keep it legal in more places that might be a little bit more restrictive. Normally when you get a big handle, you got a big blade. Not really the case in this situation. And bringing in some size comparisons, I have my Civivi Elementum, which is going to be smaller just because of how short the handle is in comparison. But if you bring the blade to blade level, they're very, very similar. If I bring in my Benchmade 940, they're going to be a little bit more comparable just because of the long handle on the Benchmade. The 940 does have a little bit of a longer blade, but not by much. However, the blade, it does have a significant amount more cutting edge than the Kizer Tomb. And then for the guys that are into old school traditionals and slip joints, here is my 91mm Victorinox. And this is a pretty good size overall. Again, I think it fits great, and it's helped by the fact that they have really nice jimping on the back of the blade. It goes down here for kind of a far back saber, all the way up here for kind of like a Filipino grip or a good whittling grip, because you can choke up so high on this. Very, very cool. The blade itself is Nitro V, and it's got a nice coating here. I've been using this on cardboard and a bunch of other stuff. You can see no real wear anywhere, maybe a little bit along the edge, but that's about it. Nice clean blade as well. And you can see this little stuff on the back. That's just oil. Coating's fared very, very well. And again, I want to point out, very clean, very tasteful branding. A little Kizer here. You've got the Tomb on the back, Nitro V, and the Maker's Mark kind of stuff there. Very nice and minimal. And in terms of HRC on the Nitro V, because I know some folks will ask, it's on the softer side, which in my opinion is where it should be, 60 to 61 HRC. Some people in folders might want it a little bit higher, 62, 63, but because of it being in 60 to 61, you can have that needle fine tip and not worry about it as much as you might with other stainless steels, because Nitro V and its sister steel AEBL are one of the toughest steels in the world. Basically, EDC RV2, 3V, they're in the same realm as those two steels at that 60, 61 HRC. Once you get over 62 HRC, it really drops in toughness quite rapidly, and then you end up with just a crappier version of Magna Cut. And there's no reason to do that. So if you're going to use Nitro V, you might as well do 60, 61 HRC. That allows us to have a fine tip, but a fairly capable, less fragile tip than other stainless steels. I love that. It's a more affordable folder. You're not going to get crazy good edge retention regardless of what HRC you put this at. So I'm perfectly fine with that. Now moving down to the lock, this is a button lock and it is a very smooth button lock out of box unless you really wang on it. So let me do this off camera so I don't whack anything. Like that. When you really, really hit it hard, it gets a little bit of lock stick, at least out of the box. I've been carrying this for 2-3 weeks. Maybe that'll work out over time. But in terms of normal opening and shutting with the button lock flick or with the front flipper here, absolutely no problem with that. One pro tip with the front flipper, keep your index finger below the shoulder. If you come up here, it's just not going to open. It'll be clunky because of the arc that travels in. It goes just past the shoulder when it's shutting. So you need to keep your index below that. Otherwise, you're going to keep whacking it on your finger and have a bad time. I don't bother with the front flipper. Honestly, I don't think it needs to be there, but it's not anything that's necessarily a bad thing in my opinion. It might be something other people don't like stylistically. I just simply, for the sake of utilitarianism, I just use the lock. It's just so much nicer, fidgetier, things like that. I don't fidget with my knives normally, but I will sit here sometimes and just play with this like that, annoy basically everyone else in the household. So overall, I like the button lock. I like the way it's implemented. One thing to keep in note, because people really like coffin knives with a dagger on them, maybe something with a spear point, with a false edge or a swedge like my M16 here, because those knives usually have a guard like that or two guards, you're not going to be able to do that with this type of setup. So they might be able to come out with a spear point version in the future or a dagger version in the future, but it might have to be a fixed blade or with a different lock because of the way this blade sits in here. The button lock is centered right there, so they can't have a guard on the front come through and whack into the pillar of the button lock. And you also have a stop pin there and then a supporting possibly second stop pin right there. You just wouldn't be able to do that kind of setup with this. They would have to basically redesign the whole pivot area and the lock setup. Maybe they could come out with a liner lock version of that in the future. Moving on to the scale material itself. This is the one I picked just so you could see those skeletonized liners, which is really awesome, but they do have others out there. They have a wood version if you really want to get that coffin vibe. They also have a black aluminum version, and then they have a really nice brain coral looking kind of raindrop blue G10 version. Really, really cool stuff. I think they all have their merits. I went with Ultim just so you guys could see it. I wish they had used black Ultim personally, but not a lot of people really like that, so not a lot of folks are buying it anymore. They're sticking to the yellow Ultim, the kind of honey-colored Ultim. One thing I think they could do in the future is come out with more versions. So if this actually sells well, I think they could do a lot with this, like do a whole Halloween event thing, or do a different one every Halloween. They could do a black and orange. They could do an orange and green setup. They could do a red and black vampire coffin setup. They could do a neon green and black zombie setup, or a green and pink splatter type thing, red blood splatter zombie setup. And they could also do something like with my setup here for my Benchmade, a ghost version where they have natural G10 and black. I think this is one of the best color combinations out there. I really love this. This on that would be really cool because you'd still get the translucent nature of the scales. And what's really cool is if you wanted something like that to stick out even more, you can take the scales off with natural G10 and oil on the liner, and it makes it appear a little bit better. You can see here where I put a little bit too much oil in under the pivot. That's showing through darker. And now imagine if you did that with this. That'd look really, really cool, in my opinion. If you're going to have the gimmick, really rock that gimmick. So overall, I think this is pretty neat. I've had no problem cutting cardboard in terms of hot spots or anything like that. The coating looks great after a couple weeks of use. Now, we're going to keep doing this for a couple months and see if, maybe I get sick of it or something like that. But overall, I like being able to use it and have a good functional knife while still getting that visual style. It's something where it is a little bit form over function. This isn't now the most comfortable finger choil in the world, that there are better out there, obviously. But for having that gimmick of a coffin, it's not uncomfortable. It's just not super comfortable. And so that's just one thing where, that's that. And also some folks maybe would want a lanyard bead area down here. Maybe they could do something with that, maybe move that body screw up, or, have a pillar here. It is something where you could put one around the pillar in the back because the blade is short. You're not really going to risk necessarily cutting that if you do it with maybe microcord. If you use paracord, that's probably going to cut. But microcord, I think you could get through there just fine. But it'd be a lot better if they had like a dedicated hole. But obviously they would have to extend the handle even further. If you want to do paracord, that could become a problem. So just keep that in mind. But overall, I think they've got a really cool blade here. It's a really nice gimmick in my opinion. I'm all about it. And I really hope they do different variations in the future. Even if it's just Halloween specific sprint runs, I'd be all for a natural JG10 version, a pink and green zombie version, blood splatter version, whatever. I'm down for whatever they've got coming forward. So thank you to Kizer for sending this to us. I'm going to keep testing it to make sure it's not just a gimmick, make sure it stays, good and solid over the coming months. But so far, I'm pretty impressed that they were able to give us something really cool, but still keep it very functional. So until next time, guys, stay safe, stay informed, and let me know what you think about this. Is it gaudy? Is it cool? What side of the aisle are you on? Because I think most people are going to be very one or very the other.